it going?
It is going.
Okay. How many feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1 to screw it in, 1 to excoriate men for creating the need for illumination, 1 to blame men for inventing such a faulty means of illumination, 1 to suggest the whole screwing bit to be too rape-like, 1 to blame men for not changing the light bulb, 1 to blame men for trying to change the light bulb instead of letting a woman do it, and maybe 1 to blame men for creating a society that discourages women from changing light bulbs. This was the best joke I came across when researching the changing trends of feminism over time, and I think it speaks for itself. Feminism is defined as the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. Over generations, feminism has evolved and has begun to grow a rather large and negative connotation. But why? Feminism was once a word that used to encompass power, prospect, and purpose. A word that universally motivated women across America to achieve absolute social equality. The truth is, many women who call themselves a feminist today are no longer fighting for this equality. They are fighting for something much different. Now, please don't mistake my point of view for opposing feminism. I wholeheartedly support women's rights and gender equality. But with that being said, we have to look at the facts for what they truly are. The truth is, today's form of feminism has transformed and evolved into a tiresome and pretentious deconstruction of society's trivial details. But when did this all change? We are going to take a look at the 3 waves of feminism and how each wave has ultimately impacted American society in their time. We're also going to look at the social differences of each wave and maybe even come to a conclusion of why feminism is beginning to be looked down upon in society today. The first wave of feminism was set between the late 19th and early 20th century, surfacing from an urban, industrialism, liberal, and socialistic political environment. The main focus for feminism during this time period was suffrage and other basic opportunities for women, such as job opportunities and changing roles of women. Any of you fellow APU's history students or anyone with some knowledge of American history may be familiar with the Seneca Falls Convention that took place in 1848, where 300 men and women gathered together for the cause of equality for women for the first time ever. You may also recognize the name Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who drafted the first declaration addressing women's rights. These were all major and awesome accomplishments made by the first wave of feminism, and in my opinion reflect the forte in the history for feminism. Feminists were the epitome of social reform in the late 19th and early 20th century. Feminism was even interrelated with the temperance and abolitionist movements and gave voice to now famous activists like the African-American Sojourner Truth. Feminists in this time period were what I like to call the go-getters that left a significantly positive impact on American society for women. Second wave feminists were also similar in this impact. The second wave of feminism began in the early 1960s and continued into the late 90s. This wave was again unfolded in the many social reforms such as the civil rights movement. You could very easily say women were a part of the variety of minority groups that were on a rise during this time. The voice of the second wave feminists was increasingly radical, and that trend is still evident to this very day. In this phase, sexuality and reproductive rights were dominant issues, and much of the movement's energy was focused on passing the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, guaranteeing social equality regardless of sex. This, like the accomplishments made in the first wave of feminism, exemplifies yet another milestone for feminism in American history. Something notable I'd like to bring up in the second wave of feminism was that feminists were increasingly becoming radical and staging their voices on a larger scale. One example of this would be the Miss America pageant in 1968 held in Atlantic City. Feminists paraded what they held to be a degrading cattle parade that reduced women to objects of beauty dominated by a patriarchy that sought to keep them in the home or in a dull, low-paying job. The radical New York group called the Red Stockings staged a counter pageant in which they crowned a sheep as Miss America and threw oppressive feminine artifacts such as bras, girdles, high heels, makeup, and false eyelashes into the trash can. The second wave of feminism was also becoming increasingly theoretical, based on a fusion of neo-Marxism and psychoanalytic theory, and began to associate the subjugation of women with broader critiques of patriarchy, capitalism, normative heterosexuality, and the woman's roles as wife and mother. So basically, to conclude, the second wave of feminism really focused on tangible social equality to men and also the expectations and roles of women in society as shown. This brings us to the third and final wave of feminism. The third wave of feminism began in the mid-90s and has continued on to the status quo. So far in this wave, many constructs have been destabilized, including the notions of universal womanhood, body, gender, and sexuality. An aspect of the third wave that mystifies the mothers of the earlier feminist movements is the readoption by young feminists of the very red lipstick, high heels, and cleavage proudly exposed by low-cut necklines that the first two phases of the movement identified with male oppression. But let's take a look at some of the movements in modern-day feminism. An article published by the New Statesman in May of last year explains that there are 5 main issues facing the third wave of feminism, or what they address it as in the article, modern feminism. These issues include the division of domestic labor, second, the media and setting an inaccurate expectation for the appearance of woman, third, again addressing the treatment of women in a workplace, fourth, social inequality including the discrimination of transgendered, bisexual, or lesbian women, and lastly, addressing violence against women. And how exactly have feminists responded, and how exactly have feminist responses panned out to these issues, you ask? With extreme and radical movements such as the free bleeding movement, in which radical feminists attempted to convince other women that feminine hygiene products are a form of oppression and should not be utilized. Ergo, the name free bleeding, where women literally, openly, and freely bled during monthly menstruational periods to prove a point. Dismissing hygiene and health is the least of feminist concerns when it comes to letting our blood flow freely. And I highly doubt that this filthy trend would be of any help to advancing our human species. Clearly, feminist movements in the third wave of feminism have gone from meaningful protest to outrageous and pretentious stages to get attention for a cause that really isn't there. Most feminists today don't really understand what a feminist truly is, nor what the concerns facing true feminism are today. I saw about 5 cute little Rosie the Riveters for Halloween this year at my high school, and the ones who I asked claimed to be a feminist. Not to be condescending, but I believe a true feminist would know that Rosie the Riveter is probably the most ironic feminist propaganda known to man. What these people may not be aware of is the fact that Rosie the Riveter icon was an counterproductive image created by men. But of course, the red lipstick wearing unaware teenage girls of America who claim to be wholehearted feminists are not aware of this. And that's the true problem of feminism today. Feminism is beginning to be looked down upon today for a simple reason. It's losing its true identity and losing focus for the real problems of feminism. Here in America, we have to face the truth. Women have every equal opportunity that a man does, and the real problem truly lies in less developed or developing countries. That's where our focus should be, and the areas where women aren't even looked at as the same species as men. So to conclude, my fellow feminists, menists, women of America, the next time a guy offers to open the door for you, it's not because he believes you aren't independent or self-sufficient enough to get it yourself. It's simply called being courteous.